Oh, hello, Clay. How you doing?
I'm amazing. This is wild. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Oh my gosh. I can hear you great. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Did you see those graphics?
I was gonna say, yeah, that is amazing. Yeah.
They Barnes and Noble, I'm blown
Right.
away.
That's
They
cool.
they pulled out all the stops. Though I will take I'm gonna take offense. I will not take offense to the fact that when my name sprawled up, it had some guy just like sitting on the couch, like popping popcorn. I was like,
Yeah, totally.
oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
All right, so let's get this wonderful show started. So everybody, my name is Keith Rosson, and I'm the author of Fever House, The Devil by Name. I got a new one, Coffin Moon, coming out in September. And I would like to welcome everybody to Clay McLeod Chapman's launch day event for his newest novel, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. Look at that. Look at that beautiful thing right there. Um, I'm going to read your bio here really fast, Clay, and I had to parse it down because of how multidisciplinary you are, and it's still like a page long. You know what I mean? So let's get this over with, and so we can get started. You know what I mean? Clay McLeod Chapman is the author of the novels What Kind of Mother, Ghost Eaters, Whisper Down the Lane, the remaking, as well as, of course, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, and the upcoming novelette Stay on the Line, the novella Kill Your Darling, and the upcoming creator-owned comic series Seance in the Asylum, published by Dark Horse. Have I got that right so far?
That's great. That's all you
Okay,
need.
because we
We
got
we're
more to
good.
go.
We can go now. Like
We
that
got
was
more to go, man.
okay.
Clay is an accomplished screenwriter with multiple projects adapted to film, including 2015's The Boy, starring David Morse and Rainn Wilson, 2022's animated Wendell and Wild, produced by Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions, and the story podcast Quiet Part Loud, which ran for 12 episodes and was also produced by Monkey Paw. We are almost done. He's written numerous titles for Marvel, including Carnage, The Avengers, Amazing Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Venom, and more. His storytelling series, The Pumpkin Pie Show, has existed for over 20 years, and he currently teaches writing at the Actors Studio MFA program at Pace University. And I personally was fortunate enough to see Clay read at last year's StokerCon, and it has haunted me ever since. And he has got to be one of the just most tremendous and electrifying public readers I've ever seen. Um, and so, with all that said, hi Clay, how you doing?
I'm great. This is the best. I mean, like honestly, this is best. Like I was like three people are gonna show up, and
Right.
it was gonna be you and me, and probably a
Yeah.
family member.
Right.
So like and
Reluctantly.
exactly. I can't like this is above and beyond. So I just want to say thank you to Barnes and Noble for putting this all together. Thank you, Keith, for joining me. And thank you to everyone who is watching this because it's the it's a matinee. It's the Tuesday afternoon kind of
There you
you
go.
know, that's what it is.
Yeah. So before we get started in, I have a bevy of questions, and then you got a ton of reader questions. Before we get into that, can you just as spoilery or non-spoilery as you want to get, can you give us a rundown of Wake Up and Open Your Eyes?
I will I will definitely try. I
Okay.
mean, I feel like for me the kind of way that I like to pitch it is like let's just imagine, let's hypothesize that half of the country is possessed by demons. Now, what half of the country is possessed by demons kind of depends on, where you get your information from. Like, do you get your news from social media? Do you get it from 24-hour news networks? Do you get it from do you get it from kind of annoying little earwormy, children's songs in the vein of Baby Shark that kind of play on a loophole for an infinity.
Yeah.
Um, Screens are bad. Screen time, maybe we should kind of call it down, but in my mind, um, watching the kind of schisming of our kind of current status as a country, and but doing it by way of information.
Gotcha. So, okay. So
Very, very vague, wasn't it?
it was tremendously vague, which is great. You're the boss here. You know what I'm saying? Um, so apart from like one character, essentially the main characters of this book are a kind of quintessential nuclear family, right?
Mhm.
It's like a husband, a wife, children, dog. There's even a dog in it. Um, so I am operating under the assumption that everything was done very intentionally here. And so, like, why not just a disparate group of people and why a nuclear family and showing how this affects everybody in this tight knit, quintessential American family?
Yeah. Well, I will confess to a few things up front and say that over the course of the last few years, I have been kind of dealing with this kind of notion of certain members of my family kind of veering more towards kind of conservative um, news sources, and I know that I'm not alone in this, and that this has been kind of a issue, a kind of conversation to have at the dinner table, at Thanksgiving, and what what it was always kind of like interesting to me in kind of reading about this in the news, seeing kind of other people kind of speak about this. There was always that idea. I think, and I think, it was quite literally just someone saying in some news bite, "Oh, it's like my parents are possessed." And there was just something really kind of like fascinating about that to me, that uh, seemed like an aperture into kind of talking about where things are, where we're at. And I I wanted to kind of like strive for a certain kind of level of balance within the kind of schema of the book, and not have it be kind of like poking fingers just at one kind of end of the political spectrum, but kind of essentially kind of take everybody to task, which I do think like the best satires do. So to answer your question, kind of in terms of that kind of surrogate, like that what you could kind of say is the main character. There's this one guy, Noah Fairchild, who is a uh, straight white middle-aged, like in his like mid 40s, husband who lives in a cultural elite, eastern coastal elite city. Uh, like these are all things that I myself am. So like I feel
Yeah.
like for me, like I'm just kind of like I'm starting by taking myself to task to a certain degree.
Yeah, he has his come to Jesus moment of realization, you know what I mean? Of like all the how like kind of tremendously fragile all of that stuff is, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but like I feel as if, thinking on the kind of horror end of things, like thinking of, say, Exorcist, which, the book is over 50 years old, the movie is over 50 years old at this point. And the things that, like, the template, like the kind of like the foundational text that is The Exorcist, the things that kind of traumatized readers, film going audiences, like that was one girl, and you have this, I think she's like 12 years old, like a 12-year-old child. And there's that moment, and I'm hearing it from the movie, forgive me, but like the the two priests are kind of having that conversation of like, why would the devil do this? And it's that idea of like, well, to despair. And that was like one child 50 years ago. So for me, in writing this book, like I wanted to kind of think of like, well, if you had one kid 50 years ago, where would we be today? And I feel like we would probably be at, you know, the we would hit critical mass here in terms of like possession scale. Um, but yeah, like I honestly like there was something about taking the nuclear family, like a family of four, a mom, a dad, a son, two sons, older brother, little brother, and and showing the ways in which uh, the kind of insinuation, that kind of insidious uh, dismantling and kind of making one vulnerable by way of where where you're connecting, and yeah, like
Yeah.
that really truly just felt like a fun and interesting kind of aperture into this idea of like, well, this is just one house, but
Right.
it's happening next door, maybe it's happening across the street, maybe it's
Right.
happening in the building, like the
Yeah.
apartment above yours. Yeah.
And this family was already like tremendously disconnected before these events started happening. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I want to kind of ask you about again intentionality with like a lot of the impetus for this book as far as the avenues of transformation for these characters. You have like a blender, a television, an app, right?
Yeah.
So like are all of and so it's not just like straight body, like there's something happening to my body. These are like technologies,
Yeah.
right? And so that clearly has to be another intentionality, right? Just beyond like um, our divisiveness politically, right?
Yeah.
So how did you come across that idea versus just like people's bodies just start changing, they start going crazy, you know?
I mean, have you ever had your email account hacked? Like, have you ever clicked on something that you just shouldn't have, and you're like, oh my God,
Right. Yeah.
like it's I distinctly remember, as I mean, this happened probably years ago, where like a friend sent me and this was like, you know, old enough that I should have known better, but early enough that like it wasn't kind of like a full on kind of like uh, you know, internet VD assault, but like
Yeah.
that idea of like someone sending you a link and being like, "Hey, I just saw this cool thing. You should click on this link." And I was just I was like,
Right.
"Oh, okay." Like I mean, my friend sent it, so like why not? And then like I lost my I was hacked. Like my
Uh,
entire what amounted to my virtual identity at that point, like, whatever credit cards, whatever was of mine that existed on the internet at that point was just taken away from me. And I felt so siloed. Like I felt like I can't, like I was buying things that I had no idea that I was buying. I was like,
yeah.
like racking up credit card bills that I had no idea. And like, but it was all under my name. It was me. And there was just that like strangest feeling of like, who am I? like my sense of like, virtual autonomy, my identity was just like it was someone else's. And to me, what I love about demonic possession is that, through the kind of canon of like this is what we see in The Conjuring, this is what we see in The Exorcist, this is what we see, like, and they like have a list, and it's like a very like like the list itself is like a trope where it's like it's
Uh-huh.
infestation,
Right,
but
right.
like there's like five or six of them, and it's like each one is kind of like depression, obsession, like, and then like the final one is possession. And I just I feel like you could take that list and then like write each of them down on one kind of column, and then like directly on the other side you could have getting my email hacked, or getting like getting uh doppelgangered on a
Right.
social media app,
Yeah.
and like oddly enough, like the writing, like the exploration of this book was just kind of like a almost a one-to-one, like, well, this is where we are on the possession scale, and this is where we can be on the social media,
Was that like integral? Like was that intentional when as you were writing it? Like was it that kind of coherent, like that checklist as you went down and
I mean, to a degree, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I will confess that like it was a pretty it was a relatively smooth ride when it came to kind of like, okay, this book is parsed into three separate sections. They're phases. And the first section is kind of like the moment, like the the day leading up to the apocalypse. And then part two, phase two, kind of goes back in time. And now we're kind of a couple months leading into the apocalypse. And then phase three, part three, is essentially the apocalypse, the
Yeah.
first 5 minutes of the apocalypse. Um, and phase two, that kind of middle section, was where I lived the longest because that was honestly like just wanting to show and map kind of like almost in excruciating detail like like charting the course of a family of four, independently, individually getting like possessed, um by way of like this checklist of things,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple more, and then I want to bust out the readers' questions. So okay, we talked a little bit about satire and where satire and horror kind of live in the same house to a degree. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And there is a lot of satire in this until it runs through that wall and into horror straight up, right? So like, there's a lot of lampooning of like political spectrums, and then it just goes beyond that into something terrifying. So like, how did you straddle that line, and how did you know when to like, get the fucking dog involved? Like,
I mean, that's that's the thing. I don't know if I know or if I did a good job. Like, there is something profane, I think, about this book. There's something like, I think satire is always kind of like walking that razor's edge,
yeah,
and I think that uh, for those comedies or those kind of like sharp, kind of acute satires that kind of, it's almost like they have to think two or three steps ahead, because where they are when they kind of initiate the joke, quote unquote, versus where the reader will be, where the audience will be. Like, it's almost like it it has to land, but has to land further down the road. So uh, there's always that like inherent risk, I think, to satire. I think the laziest satire, and the thing that I'm really nervous about, is like, it's just too easy to kind of like attack the lowest hanging fruit, you know?
yeah,
And this book, I think, runs that risk in a way for a, like, if you're not kind of like clicking into the way that the satire works, um, it's very easy to kind of feel like, well, like, it's kind of taking the right to the task. But I think like a breath later, it kind of like pivots, and it's like at a certain point you realize it's beyond the kind of binary of right and left, and it's
yeah. It absolutely begins to me as like, oh, he's just kind of riffing on like right-wing politics, but it like expands beyond that into kind of pointing out American fallacies as a whole,
yeah. I mean,
and
it's
the
like,
tremendous cost of it.
I mean, it's mutated. Like,
Yeah,
it's not even evolution as much as it is just like, I mean, given like where we are with like wellness culture, and where we are with like ideologies, like, it's not black and white. Like, everything is just so blurry right now that it's like, it's so, like, you have to be so kind of in tune to your own kind of like moral and ethical compass, that like, I mean, like, I can scroll through Instagram right now and I'll be like, oh, that looks kind of cute, and then like, a couple clicks later, it's like, whoa, where did it, like, what have,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
um and that's for those who are not necessarily kind of like aware or guarded to that. Like, you can understand why a certain kind of defense mechanism or wall is lowered, and it becomes
right.
easy for a demon to just hop on in and
Yeah.
possess you.
So there were a couple scenes, and I won't spoil them for anyone, but I either was physically nauseous from them or filled with an absolute dread.
Yeah.
What you have done with rest stops is tremendously unfair. So is there anything that you or your editor were like, oh man, I pushed the envelope here and I need to pull back a little bit?
You know, I mean, I have to I have to own it. Like it's like I did this. Like this is my fault. Like I have done this and it is out there and the world is gonna take it and they're gonna do what they will with it. And like I have to be at peace with that because like it's you know, it's gonna rest on me. It is I will say that Quirk, my publisher and my editors there, were extremely supportive and it is kind of phenomenal in terms of like what what wasn't on the chopping block versus the things that were.
Uh-huh.
I I kid you not, and I'm forgive me for being like moderately vulgar, but the biggest argument, the biggest kind of debate for the entire uh like editing process had everything to do with when you're texting and like
Hmm.
the three bubbles pop up.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with those three bubbles and what they mean. And I thought and I'm so sorry, America, Barnes and Noble people. But like for me, seeing like oh god, this is spoiler, but when you see those three dots, it looks rather ejaculatory to me.
A
I
little
know,
bubble, right?
yeah, it's like
Yeah, it's a bubble, right?
it's like it's and like and like my editor I mean like she was like that's too far. And I was like, I really, I really want that. And it was,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like, and like, God bless her. Like, we went back and forth. She's like, you have to cut that. And I was like,
Yeah,
no, I
right, right.
want that. And
Yeah,
like that was, that was the hill. That's the
yeah,
hill I died on.
right.
And, and so that's in the book. And
Yeah,
like, now that I've drawn attention to it, maybe that will draw attention away from all the other stuff
right. There
that's,
you go. Yeah, yeah.
um,
Um, all right.
yeah.
Well, I have tons more, but I let's get to some readers' questions here. Um, okay, so let's see. Alice Oppenheimer writes, was there anything, what was the most surprising thing that you kind of learned about yourself in the process of writing
Oh,
this
wow.
novel?
I mean, this is a hard one. Like I mean, I I've been really fortunate to be able to write uh professionally for a living and tell the stories that I want to tell. Um and I've been able to do this for a while now and but there was like a pretty steep learning curve and it really honestly started when I came to Quirk, where I wrote this book called Whisper Down the Lane, and it was my second book with Quirk, and they like for me beginning with Whisper Down the Lane, it was kind of like this motion of like I have to put I have to write about things that scare me, personally scare me. Um, and it's such a kind of odd kind of switch to flip, but like once I started kind of writing from that perspective of like what I'm scared of, uh, I was more emotionally invested in the stories. I was more like I found myself in the book more than say I necessarily had been before. The books before were fun and they were what they were. They were spooky books, but like
Yeah.
it it was odd like it just kind of leaned more into that. So, with Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, I'm writing about something that really truly does terrify me and it's the that kind of schisming effect that I'm feeling with my own family and how siloing that is, how I feel very alone a lot of the time because it's difficult to cross that barrier now. Um, I still love my family, but it's there. This is
Yeah,
this is where we're at.
right.
So yeah, I'm. This book was a kind of existential scream into the void of I'm helpless. I'm like I'm powerless over this, and yeah, it. I that's where this book is coming from. That's the
Yeah.
fear that I'm kind of tapping in with
I
this
think
one.
there's a ton of people that like can relate to that, you know. I think that's
Yeah.
a very like common thing for a lot of people in the country. And so I Dawn Winter says it seems like the plot of the book was inspired by families losing loved ones to QAnon and other cult-like political movements. So was there a particular event that inspired the plot or any of the crisis points in the novel?
Yeah.
So it sounds like kind of you're drawing from some familial stuff here.
Yes, I am. And, it's but also my family has to deal with me.
Right.
So like it's the kind of like what is the other kind of,
Right.
perspective of that where it's like who like can you imagine this book written from the like I don't know. I don't want to say the opposite side, but like, there's like a different point of view. And I feel like if I'm gonna write this, I have to take myself to task as well. Like I have to, you know, I don't think anyone should be safe or like, so I really wanted to kind of scrutinize myself and honestly, like, I mean, to be totally frank, like a third of this book is just me kind of like poo-poo talking myself for being just a dumbass of like,
Yeah.
I'm no better. Like, I'm just like, you know, but that said, also to answer the question, uh, it is I mean what I would love to draw attention to is that at the back of the book, in the acknowledgments, there's like a expanded reading list of like all the books that I read and imbibed in order to kind of write this book.
Mhm.
Um, and I very, very, very early on, uh, and I'm gonna absolutely blank, so forgive me, but like I was really obsessed with this notion of radicalization by way of social media. So like young women, teen children, boys, girls were getting indoctrinated into terrorist cells uh, globally, like some here in the States, but in Paris and like Spain and like how like it was all through Facebook or it was all through Twitter, and how you just start someone like slides into your DMs and then you establish a connection or a friendship, and then as that progresses, it like
Right.
who they are like is not necessarily who they kind of say they are or present themselves. And that to me was utterly fascinating that like take that very real world notion and instead of it being say ISIS or it's a demon, but like
Right.
you only have this avatar, this screen image to kind of
And if you're desperate for that kind of like connection, right?
yeah
Um, super susceptible to it.
yeah yeah.
Yeah. So Albina Miles asks what the hardest scene to write was.
Oh man. um I ooh, I really want to answer that honestly. I uh I will say that I spent the most time in writing the second section, the phase 2. And I really kind of wanted to dig into that. So I don't know if it was the hardest, but it was the one that was the most kind of like I lived in that place.
Mhm.
But I will say the one section that got revised the most with my editors and the kind of like the process of, really kind of like the that back and forth with my editors was the first part. Um, because I'm really crappy at beginnings. I think it's questionable what I'm good at, but like I will say that I'm crappy at beginnings. And so this book, like the first part, kind of like it began like way earlier. Like it was like there are chapters that are not like
Just
like
kind of leading up and
yeah
yeah,
yeah and they're like maybe we should start it here and like cut all of that stuff. And I
yeah.
was just like, wow, there goes my nose to spite my face.
Right.
But it was amazing. Like, I mean, it was like by really kind of doing the back and forth with my editors, we kind of like compressed this thing into like a real kind of suffocating,
Yeah.
like it's that ramp of like you're on the roller coaster and it's just going, 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 going. And then once you're latched in, like you can't
Hmm.
stop. And
Yeah, I mean, it is a very like kind of claustrophobic book, and once the kind of changes begin for everybody, it's just fucking bleak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's see. Mido Taha asks if you are, and I hope I got that name right, if you're a plotter or a pantser. When you're writing, do you like how do you navigate all that
Yeah.
as far as like what's your process like? And this is interesting too, because you do so many different avenues of writing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'd be curious to hear how like novels work versus other things, you know?
I mean, I'm a planter. I think it's like there's that weird I do need a certain scaffolding of like, okay, here's the roadmap. Here's the A to B. Like I want to begin my destination here and I want to end here. And in any, wonderful road trip kind of way, you you think you've charted the course, but maybe you kind of divert or make a pit stop or so for me like I want what is ultimately the kind of like barest a very minimal treatment or outline that's usually like maybe 3 to 5 pages. Well, I mean, sometimes it's longer. I think like the one for this was probably like a lot longer. Um, and it allows me to say, okay, I need to get to this spot. I need to get to this destination. Uh, but the journey is always that's the discovery. That's where, I mean, honestly, that's where it kind of comes alive. And like, I'm making all the mistakes. Like, I have to mess up and get lost. And
Right.
like, you know, my first drafts are, they're really bad. Like it's because it's just like a big bloated mass of just
As they
whatever.
should be, right? I mean, that's like, I think that's the best gift I get to give myself is like that breathing room to write just a terrible first draft, you
Hmm.
know?
Do you give yourself permission to do it?
Yeah, yeah, because it's like by the time I'm done with the draft, I have more information about what my character, who they are, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so by the time I finish a book, I'm like, oh, he would actually do this at the beginning, or he's this type of guy.
Okay. So then I have to turn the question around to you because I think Fever House Fever House is still with me. Like that is one of the most
Oh, shit.
amazing novels. Like the grandiosity of that book and the fact that it's like a duology and that like you you end Fever House and you can say, but wait, it's not over, guys. And
Right.
and it's like like if I was like I feel like Wake Up and Open Your Eyes is the like young like grubby cousin to Fever House.
I think that I think Fever House is more like the scope is like world-ish, not world-ish, but like a lot of moving parts. Where yours is like it's a really granular focus. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Of this like yes, it affects the entire world, but we're looking at these five people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like when you were doing the planting or the outlining, are you bullet pointing that stuff or is it just like a free kind of free barf, like a 3-page free barf that you're
I
working.
mean, it's they're kind of like they're almost like bullet points.
I love the minutia of this shit. Like
Yeah.
listening to how writers like figure this stuff out. I
Yeah.
love it. So because that's way different from how I do it. So I love hearing how
Well,
stuff works.
because if I wrote, like Fever House, I would have to imagine like there's a wall behind you that has nothing but like note card after note card of like this happens and this like you're like a red threader or something.
Right, right. It took a lot of notebooks, yeah, to kind of figure bits out for sure.
Man.
Um, yeah. So, okay, I have to jump in with my own question here. So there's a particular scene with the blender. Uh, and again, I'm just like wondering, like, if you had a moment where you're like, I don't know, it's too much. It's too much, and I need to step back a little bit. Or like,
Yeah.
where does that like fearlessness of just like, I'm just gonna fucking do it, you know?
I can't imagine the portrait that we're painting for this novel.
It
Um,
again, it is like it's a buildup, but
yeah,
when it arrives and the dinner scene, like what have you done, Clay?
yeah,
The dinner scene where they eat and yeah,
yeah,
there's just
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
I mean it navigates there's still an emotional resonance with everybody, but
yeah,
it's like holy shit, man.
yeah.
It's rough.
It's rough, but like, okay, again, I'm gonna go back to The Exorcist. I mean, like, here's the deal for me, and I am acknowledging that maybe my moral compass, my horror morality compass, is just way off. But I feel like if we began 50 years ago with The Exorcist, which is a stone cold class, like that is like religious text to me. And the things that happen in that book and happen in the film, I I don't want to be vulgar about The Exorcist, but I think of like the scene where Reagan is violating herself and her mother bears witness to that. And uh Reagan like forces her mother to participate. And that happened that is a traumatizing scene that like has seared its way into the consciousness of me, and I would imagine a lot of people who watched that film maybe at the wrong age. Uh but like that was in the 70s.
Yeah,
And then I think of like, you know, you fast forward a little bit through time, and then like we come to The Evil Dead, which I think takes the kind of scale of The Exorcist and kind of expands upon it. And I love Evil Dead. I would say that when I started writing Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, I was like, it's The Americans meets The Exorcist. But the deeper into it I started to write, I was like, oh no, 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 no. This is The Americans meets Evil Dead 2.
mhm.
Um, and I think that like we're we're kind of in a place within the kind of possession narrative where there aren't many, I want to say sacred cows, but like uh,
Yeah,
the where and it's not even that I'm like trying to one up the Evil Dead or trying to one
right.
up the Exorcist, but it's like we have lived within that realm for so long that like who are we now? Like what is like so blenders, pizza cutter, like it's like these things exist in the household. I mean, that's the thing. Like I just took a tour around my house and I was
Right.
like like what is the arsenal here that is going to like, you know,
I love it. Yeah, totally. Like you could do a lot of shit to the human body. Just the stuff here.
yeah. And and that's the thing about possession to me, where it's like I think whatever you want to, whether this is a possession narrative, whether this is a zombie apocalyptic narrative, whether this is a societal collapse narrative, whether it's all of these things in some kind of blendered blend, frappe, it to me the need was to be, and this is going to sound crazy, but like as honest to possession in like, like who would be the worst demon to possess our bodies? Like someone who just doesn't care about the
Right.
body. Like I don't care if you're in the same condition you were in when I first possessed you. Like I'm going to run you into the ground. And there's
Yeah.
the and that, I don't know, like that was, it seemed okay. We're friends here. We're all friends here, everybody. Uh Honestly, Exorcist, Evil Dead 2, and then January 6th. And I watch footage of January 6th, and I have never been more horrified, more traumatized. Like the things that I'm watching on that, where people are asking to stop and begging for their lives, and like it it just feels I mean like the scale of that moment and the intimacy of that footage was just so it was so horrifying that like in writing this book, which is layered and shellacked with metaphor and fiction and monsters, I I I kind of had to do that. Like I had to like we are now this is the world that we live in and we have to see that that kind of scale
Yeah.
of monstrosity, of horror, of
Right.
horror.
I want to to come back to that as my was my closing question, but I got one more before that.
Okay.
And Rachel Donovan wrote and asked what your who your favorite character was to write, and I'm gonna ask. It sounds like you were able to kind of like till your own kind of ethical um, ground for like for Noah.
Yeah.
But like, who was the hardest character to write? So I guess your favorite and the most challenging to write.
Yeah. Um I I want to say I want to make sure that I'm getting the name right because I just like blanked and I want to say is it Jen? It's Jen, right? Jen. Um hold on. Devin. Lord, see? It's been so long. Devin. I love Devin. The mom.
Yeah.
Like I feel I feel so bad for her. And like I I mean I really put her through the ringer
Yes.
probably more than anybody else. And I will probably say that's because I love her the most. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me, but like that was like I don't know. Like she fell the farthest and hit the hardest,
Yeah.
and I love her for it.
So that's your favorite, is that right? So who was the
Yeah,
most
yeah, that's my
challenging
favorite.
to tackle?
The hardest?
Yeah.
I hate Noah because Noah's me. Like Noah, like that's like it's just like I'm basically just like yelling at my like just Mad Lib Noah for Clay, and it's just like there you
There you
go.
go. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so me, I don't know if it's the hardest, but he was like the most kind of like you.
Yeah. Right. Right, right. All right. Well, I guess in closing, and before we ask this, I want to let everybody know that if you bought a book bundle, please expect it to arrive in 8 to 10 days. But Clay, I just kind of want to go out with like, first of all, thanks so much. So stoked to be here. Um, we have about 2 weeks until a new president comes into power. And this book is very topical on this. And like, I'm, what what should we expect from horror? And what do you have, how do you plan to survive as a creative person?
Wow,
Because
holy
it's
moly,
something I'm
Keith.
struggling with very much, and I think a lot of us
Yeah.
are.
Um, I will say. I mean, I feel like there are a myriad of answers. I'm going to try to give as many of them as I can. And I think what what writing horror does for me is allow me to tell the stories that I want to tell. And again, it's that you got to have skin in the game. And what scares me
Yeah.
has become this kind of fundamental place of uh, I don't know if it's catharsis per se, but it is. This allows me a chance to kind of like share my personal fears, whether it's fears as a parent, fears as a citizen. Like I mean, like I am a dad, and I have two sons, and they are cast in my personal private horror movies. Every day I say goodbye to them,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
and
Totally.
like that like So writing and storytelling has become the place where I kind of exercise those fears and allow me a chance to kind of explore them, maybe release them. Uh, and on the other side of that, as a reader, I find that I connect to those stories more as well. And like, you know, I think that fiction and storytelling and art uh, is vital now more than ever. I mean, yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, like it's, having people who are storytellers who uh, are either not afraid to kind of tell the stories that they want to tell, regardless of what they are. Like, I mean, writing in of itself is a political act, and it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
with a
I
capital
mean,
P.
yeah, I think that people who deny that don't, they kind of refuse to understand that every personal act has political ramifications, and creative acts have tremendous political ramifications.
Yeah, because it elicits change, right? Like the best.
Right.
I mean, I was going to posit that like in reading these stories, watching these films, experience like whatever on the receiving end, there is a certain kind of the most kind of potent work, whether it's children's books or music,
Yeah.
like there is a that is a catalyst. That's kind of like a detonation of awareness, and it kind of brings something out in the reader, and maybe it like it changes them, it affects them,
Yeah.
and that change is in of itself, I think, a kind of is political.
Yeah.
Um, so I double down. I think that's the kind of like, and I don't have a laundry list of like, now I'm going to tackle I don't want to be topical. I don't want to be, I'm not like this to me, like I'm prepared to kind of take some licks for this book, but it was genuinely the most scary thing that I feel right now, and I just needed to kind of scream it. So
Yeah.
uh maybe the next book will be a love book, romance. But how are you going to deal with it? How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that I'm kind of planning to expect the unexpected, and I
Hmm.
think there's going to be hurdles and roadblocks as Americans and as artists that like we don't even see yet, you
Yeah,
know. And so
that's that's the thing. Like we are entering into an era where like nobody knows.
yeah,
Like I this feels like a stoner epiphany, but like it's that idea of like whatever happens, like we've never experienced this, but like there's
yeah,
no roadmap to this. And like
right,
that's really, I mean, that's wild.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Is there any? I'm good. Is there anything that you want to let people know before we dip out?
I I mean, this book comes out today. Like this is like I am literally like 10 hours into this book being out in the world, and like I I need you, Keith. like I need
Right,
like I
right.
need I mean like it's astounding how like I spent the day just like walking through New York,
Mhm.
and just like being like going to bookstores and like seeing the book out there, and like the best feeling is knowing that like there's someone out there who can find this book now. And maybe
Right.
it's not for everybody. Maybe it's not for, but it's for somebody. And like maybe we need it now more than we did a few months ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago. But like, I don't know. Like I I do feel like the ability to kind of connect with readers and other writers and booksellers and librarians and just people who are like navigating that unknowing.
Yeah.
Like that's I think that's like I need community more now than ever. And if if this book allows that, that would be amazing. So,
Very nice.
yeah. So thank you. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you, Keith, for chatting with me. Thank you, Barnes and Noble, for making this possible because, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Everybody grab a wake up and open your eyes. Thanks so much. And Clay, I'll talk to you later, man.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.